ready, Mr. Vice Chair.
I'm ready. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the House Economic Matters Committee. Today is Tuesday, February 22nd. This afternoon, we have 6 bills. There are a total of 37 oral witnesses. Just a reminder for everyone, if you testify, please have your camera on. The chat function as well as the hand function are for members of the committee only. First bill we have today is House Bill 568, and it's Delegate Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the ECM Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Ned Carey, here to present House Bill 568. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to introduce House Bill 568, which seeks to clarify the Real Estate Brokers Act regarding payments of commissions. For nearly 30 years, some real estate brokers have arranged for commission payments they owe to their agents to be paid at settlement. This past year, the Real Estate Commission issued guidance that these, quote, pay at the table, unquote, arrangements are not permitted by law because an unlicensed individual, the settlement agent, is paying the agent. However, the settlement agent is not paying the agent. It is the broker who is paying the agent, and the settlement agent is only transmitting the funds, just like the settlement agent does when he or she transmits a portion of the bank funds to the brokers in all transactions. I believe that this bill restores an administrative process that helps some agents receive their payments more timely. With me here today are Mr. Bill Castelli and Ms. Teresa Coons with the Maryland Realtors, and they can help explain the bill in more detail and answer any questions. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for a favorable report on House Bill 568.
Thank you, Delegate. Teresa Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, and our sponsor. My name is Teresa Coons. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Realtors this afternoon. This bill is a simple clarification of a business practice which has been a 30-year history in our industry. It is an optional business practice which allows the realtor to receive payment in a more timely fashion. When talking to some of our members, it can take up to 3 weeks to get paid after settlement when this practice is not being utilized. As you are aware, realtors do not get paid for their services until the settlement, and an average transaction typically can take about 60 days. I also believe it is imperative to be clear on one point. This is an option and not a mandated requirement for title companies to participate in the practice. They will continue to serve as a mechanism for disbursements only. HB 568 will clarify the statutes to permit title companies to transmit these payments if the payment is directed through a written disbursement authorization by a real estate broker. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. William Castelli.
Bill's over on the Senate side, sorry.
Yeah, I didn't see it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, no worries. Delegate Aarons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick questions. I appreciate the intent of the bill. I'm fortunate enough as a real estate agent, I get paid pretty quickly. I'm just wondering about, will this bill affect me as an agent on who I take my closings with? Let's say one title company abides by this and will pay me directly right there versus another one where it goes to my broker and then I get paid. Is there a problem with that? Or have you seen anything regarding that?
I think there's different business practices across the spectrum, and we will see different options being offered, but there is no competitive issues, I believe, and we don't believe there is. It's been happening for 30 years. There has never been a single complaint with MREC over this business practice.
Okay, so it's able to work now? You're saying it's working now?
It's worked for 30 years. Affiliated business arrangements have been around. I will also say the majority of it is controlled by federal law, so we're just trying to clarify it for our state practice.
Okay, so it's happening right now and you just want to clarify, why do we have the bill if it's working now? What?
The change in guidance came from a discussion during an MREC committee meeting this past year, and council advised that it would look into it. It did not stem from a complaint, and in fact, there never was one, like I said, for the last 30 years. So we're trying to clarify it and codify it since it's been a practice for a long time.
Okay, I would, just my own 2 cents worth here. I would think if I'm working for a broker who is slow pay, and it's totally not my case, my broker treats us very well, but I would think it would then steer me to somebody that would be taking that right away. That's just my thought on that bill.
Thank you,
I don't
Delegate.
know why wouldn't that be the case?
Well, if you look at the practices today across our spectrum, we can guarantee you will not find a pattern of engaging in this type of business. We see both our large and small brokers participating in it and requesting the clarification.
How did the title companies feel about it?
So on a Senate cross file, we actually had title companies support this for the same reasons in our written testimony as well, just a clarification piece of it.
Okay. Okay, I think they're testifying here too. It just sounds a little odd that I think it would change my way of dealing with title companies, but thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you, Delegate. And just a reminder, we are making it optional. It has been optional this whole time. So hopefully that would also clarify.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll go to the unfavorables. We have Mary Claire Schuler. Or is she going to be in the Senate bill as well for Senate hearing?
Unfortunately, This is Claire Schuler. How are you?
How are
Unfortunately, I was unable to make the Senate bill because my son got COVID right before. So this is
Well, I
my
hope
first
he's
chance
okay.
this is our first chance to get some oral testimony. The MLTA, my name is Claire Schuler. I'm the chair of the Legislative Committee for the Maryland Land Title Association. I'm a real estate attorney and a partner in a law firm and title agency right up the street in Arnold. The vast majority of consumers are steered to their title company based on the recommendation of their real estate agent. There's just no getting around the fact that consumers don't want to or don't know that they can shop their title services. This control by real estate salespeople is fraught with temptations to steer based on the best interest of the salesperson and not the best interest of the consumer. The problem had gotten so bad in years past that the federal government had to step in and regulate these relationships through RESPA. I don't say that to suggest that the law violates RESPA, but to highlight the fact that we need to analyze this bill under the rubric of what's best for the consumer. The MLTA believes that this bill hurts consumers in two ways. First, it opens the door to anti-competitive behavior between brokerages and their affiliated or preferred title companies. We asked for a response from all of our membership, and the vast majority of the membership objected to this bill. Their big concern, especially among the independents, is that brokerages will decide which title companies they'll allow to disperse this way and withhold that permission from the independent title companies that they're not affiliated with. And second, it shifts the administrative burdens of these disbursements onto the title companies, therefore indirectly shifting the cost onto the buyers that would otherwise be dealt with on the broker side and built into the commission and fees that the broker charges and the consumer is more aware of and can shop around at the beginning of the process. Other members emphasize the confusion and administrative burdens of having to manage these often complicated disbursements. Who's responsible for issuing the 1099s? Who's responsible if the disbursement authorization is changed at the last minute by the brokerage? It raises a lot of concerns, and the title company is not in a position to object when they rely on the real estate agents to provide them these referrals.
Okay, well, thank you. Delegate Ahrens, did you have another question? No,
Yes, I do. Actually, I do. Okay. I guess I'm a little confused on what she mentioned there about if the title company is then going to be paying me, as you said, there's nothing in this bill that indicates where those dollars are, like you said, the 1099, or who pays that and who's accountable for that. I'm a little concerned about that. And you said commissions, and the other thing I asked the title company, and maybe this is even for the realtors also, is when I disclose stuff or when I do a thing, I have to tell people who is paying me and what's paying me. Meaning, like if in years past, I guess they could sell warranties or something, and you had to tell people I'm not getting paid for those warranties. They're not incentivizing me. Will that cause some issues with this bill?
I'm not an expert on what this might mean for a real estate agent to disclose on their contract. I know the practice was used prior to the ruling by the Real Estate Commission. So I'm not aware of any changes to the contract resulting from that practice in general.
Okay.
So I don't know how that will change things or how it will be treated. But there is a big the title industry. From what I'm told from my membership, we do not like this. It makes a lot of, especially independent title companies, uncomfortable and creates a lot of confusion and administrative burden for us in the handling of these. And we can't, as an individual company, we really have no grounds to object when a real estate person who's just referred us a deal asks us to manage this for them. Otherwise, we'd be out of business.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Howard.
Yes, very quickly, Mr. Vice Chair. You have a technical note in your written testimony. It says the term compensation in 17-322. Where is that? Appears to be, I don't know, what is that?
An undefined term. So a lot of my membership, a lot of notes was, what does compensation mean? How do we handle this? Sure, that will there be any?
Is 17-322, is that federal or is that state or?
That's the in the bill itself.
Okay. Okay, I didn't know.
Sorry, I should have defined my
That's
testimony
okay.
a little bit
That's
better.
okay. I didn't know if that was Code of Federal Regulations or in the, okay.
No, that's
okay. I can
this
go back
bill,
to look at that.
in
And
this bill itself.
Have you reached out to the bill sponsor or reached across to the real estate agents to talk about your concerns as far as the defining?
No,
yeah,
the
compensation?
first we heard about this bill was when it was filed, and there were a lot of other priorities since it was filed. I know Bill Castelli has talked to Bill O'Connell on our committee as well about it. Bill works for an underwriter, so he's a little bit different from the agents. The interests are, so he wasn't as up to date on the concerns of the agencies themselves, the independent agencies. So he's more of our technical commenter. But yeah, we always have lines of communication open with the with Bill over at Association of Realtors.
Okay.
But I think this one, the timing was a little tight for us to really come together and work on this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 568. Next, we'll go to House Bill 526, which is the Prince George's and Montgomery County delegation. Is either Delegate Charles or Delegate Corman going to present this? It doesn't have anyone specific.
Mr. Vice Chair, I'm presenting on behalf of the Montgomery County delegation.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair, Delegate Charkoudian, for the record, on behalf of the Montgomery County delegation, and here, hoping WSSC is here as well. This is a bill that we put in on our subcommittee on their request. So hopefully they'll be joining. There he is, Mr. Andy. So let me just say I'm here requesting a favorable report on HB 526. And briefly, 520 WSSC is the bi-county agency, and it serves to issue plumbing licenses, gas fitter licenses, and regulate plumbing and fuel gas work in Montgomery and Prince George's County. It's
Did I freeze or did Delegate Charkoudian?
Delegate similar to work that's done by the Maryland.
Hey, Delegate Charkoudian, you're in and out. So you might want to restart.
Plumbing for SS that they are gas. And Mr. Andy, I'm sorry.
Keep going.
Sorry. I'm not sure what you caught. I love the internet in this building. So it basically gives WSSC parity with the Maryland State Board of Plumbing in terms of the fine and penalty structure to implement the fuel regulatory work that they do. So I would ask that maybe we could hear from WSSC, Mr. Andes, before I take questions, and then I'm happy to hear if folks have any questions or concerns. This is a bill that was passed through the Montgomery County delegation unanimously.
Okay, so next we'll go to Benjamin Andes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Guy Andes, Government Affairs Manager for WSSC Water. As Delegate Charkoudian attempted to describe the bill basically, as she said at the end, gives WSSC Water the authority to impose a fine up to $5,000 for violations of the WSSC fuel and gas code that we are under the authority of the Public Utilities Article to enact. Our current fine structure is a progressive fine structure that starts off at $250 and progresses all the way up to $1,000 for the fourth offense. Just simply is not a big enough deterrent to stop individuals who are violating the fuel and gas code. So as a bi-county state agency, we are asking for the parity with the with the authority that the Maryland State Plumbing Board has. And as Delegate Charkoudian said, the bill did pass out of Montgomery County unanimously, and it did pass out of Prince George's County as well with a unanimous favorable vote. We ask your support, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Just a reminder, this is both Prince George's and Montgomery County delegations. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 526. Next, we'll go to House Bill 807, which is Delegate Queen.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the Economics Matters Committee. We're doing 807 right first, correct?
Yeah, correct. I have 719. I didn't see it in my sheet. So we'll go, we'll do 807 first, and then we'll come back for 719.
No problem. So 807, the real estate brokers, salesperson, associate brokers, continuing education verification of identity bill is basically to help the broker salespersons and associate brokers to continue their online continuing education programs. And so what we've seen that after the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been an increase on online continuing education courses, and more courses that were face-to-face are now converting into online delivery. And so one of the things with these courses, there are a large number of people now in the courses. Traditionally, when they verify identity, they're having individuals put their license up to the screen and taking a picture of that. And so that information would be shared or be available for others to see that. And so what we're looking at is a way to attest someone's identity without divulging as much of their personal information. And so we're asking that a signed affidavit be used to attest that that's the person who's taking the online continuing education course. And so this is an approach that is being used in other states, and we just want to adopt that in Maryland. So this seems like a reasonable update to enable our realtors and salespersons and brokers to continue to meet their education requirements as more online course delivery methods are being used. And so we seek a favorable recommendation for HB 807.
Thank you. We'll go to Teresa Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, and thank you, Delegate Queen, for sponsoring this bill. My name is Teresa Coons with the Maryland Realtors. So HB 807 is a simple procedural bill which helps safeguard both our members' data and streamlines an arduous practice as we continue to pivot to this new normal in our virtual world. As this committee knows, to maintain or earn a real estate license, there are mandatory continuing education classes, and currently regulations require the attendee to use a photo ID to earn their credits, which poses no issues from the in-person offering. But as you can imagine, verifying 300 attendees in an online 3-hour class can be both cumbersome as well as open up serious security issues when attendees are required to either show their photo ID on the camera in the Zoom or scanning and then emailing that private information to the monitor of the class. Some attendees are simply uncomfortable with sharing that information, and I really can't say I disagree. HB 807 will simply allow remote education class attendees to use a signed affidavit. Maryland allows these for only pre-recorded classes, and currently both Virginia and the District of Columbia allow this for their live Zoom classes already. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is Bill Castelli here? Is he still over in the Senate? I don't see him in. Okay.
Nope, I'm here today. Sorry, all.
Nope, it's okay. Delegate Ahrens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was under the understanding this was we were going to present a photo idea, but this is just, you're saying we're doing an online affidavit with these classes now? Ms. Coons?
We are actually only allowed to do a photo ID, and we're asking if we could use a signed affidavit for the online classes.
Okay. Well, that makes a little, it's good to see we're going to photo ID. I think that's a remarkable step. That way people really know what you're doing. Thank you very much for the answer.
Yep. Delegate Howard.
So you're not going to photo ID, you're removing the photo ID requirement and requiring a signed affidavit instead of a photo ID. Isn't that correct, Ms. Coons?
Yes, Ms. Delegate Howard, thank you.
Okay, what further down the chain,
Mhm.
what is there in the real estate brokerage world to verify that the person who took the class is the person that took the class?
I believe both Virginia and the District of Columbia have guidelines that are very similar to how we do it, and that's what we're trying to really craft this after. So I'm sure that there's something written in there. I can also get to our council some information, but I believe because they have a specific NERDS ID, we call it in our world, so they have a specific ID they have to fill out as well, so we know that's them. So each realtor has a specific ID for our association. That's nationally, so we can follow that with a signed affidavit as well. So there's different ways to track that data, but I think we can all agree that putting your ID up in a camera in front of 300 people is a little bit of a concern for safety. This will be certainly a way to circumvent that.
So the NERDS ID, is that's tracked, but is it verified?
It is tracked and verified, yes.
So moving forward, somebody can't basically take the class and the test for someone and then say, yeah, I'm Joe Smith.
No, and I believe that there's ways to do that. The other issue, especially for our larger associations, Montgomery County has 18,000 realtors. Good example. They have several hundred at a time. It's really, the affidavit will be the great way for folks like that to get through that streamlined and determine who everyone is.
Okay.
They do have specific ways to determine those folks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you. That concludes the hearing for House Bill 807. We'll go to House Bill 719. Delegate Queen again.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby and members of the House Economic Matters Committee. HB 719, Employment of Minors, Work Permits, Information Sharing. This is a bill that's looking at trying to find a way to address our high unemployment rate for what we call youth employment. So in Maryland, youth employment rates are usually about 3 times as higher than our adult unemployment rates. Youth are considered persons between the ages of 16 to 24 years old. And currently, both our youth and adult unemployment rates remain higher than they were pre-COVID-19 levels. In 2021, adult unemployment rates are about 6.8%, with youth unemployment rates over 16%. And so there are several reasons why the youth unemployment rates are higher. It's a lot has to do with their skills mismatch. It has a lot to do with them competing for jobs that experienced adults are with these entry level jobs, and maybe lack of transportation and other reasons. But one of the things we know that they have limited experience in job seeking. And so what HB 719 is doing is allowing for the Commission of Labor and Industry, when they have information about a person, a youth that has filled out for a work permit, to be able to share that information about that person with apprenticeships programs, educational institution programs, workforce development programs, or other employees who may be in search of entry-level youth employers. So this would allow them to kind of get some sort of connection to where the jobs are, or where jobs may be available to them. So it's a way of trying to help connect our youth with a possible job readiness information, job readiness programs, so that they can enter the workforce and help to try to bring down those unemployment rates. So we seek a favorable recommendation for HB 719.
Thank you, Delegate Queen. And I do not see any witnesses signed up for oral testimony. It looks like everybody is written. So with that, that concludes the hearing for House Bill 719. Next, we'll go to House Bill 431, Delegate Foley. I do not see Delegate Foley in here. All right, we will come back to House Bill 431. Next, we'll go to House Bill 698, which is Delegate Turner.
I'm sorry, I was on.
You're good. You're good.
I was
Take your
on.
time.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Crosby, and all of my colleagues that's on this call for Economic Matters Committee. I am Delegate Veronica Turner, and I'm here today to request your favor report on House Bill 698, Labor and Employment State Minimum Wage Rate Increase. This bill will accelerate the date already established in HB 166, Labor Employment Payment of Wage Minimum Wage, passed back there in 2019, which will gradually increase the minimum wage to $15 over a period of 7 years. The bill before you today will alter the timeline to make the timeline shorter. Instead of ending date of 2026, the end date will be July 1st, 2023, thus making the 15 minimum wage available to citizens of Maryland as early as 2022 and 2023 for others. As you know, inflation is the highest it's ever been in 40 plus years, and wages are not increasing fast enough to match the rising cost of living. Small businesses are struggling to maintain employees due to paying lower wage than many large businesses. This means small business are at a competition disabled. Low wage earnings should not have to work 2 to 3 jobs just to stay afloat. One job should be enough. When low wage earning gets
So you
a
can pass
raise,
me a note if you need to.
they are most likely to spend the money immediately on basic necessity as goods and service. Many COVID-19 frontline health workers still don't earn $15 an hour. Low wage are contributing to a massive shortage of staffing crisis in healthcare. Working in food service retail has become more dangerous for workers due to the COVID itself and unsafe customers. Service workers' wage must increase to match the safety risks for their jobs. Raising the wage will boost the economy as we recover from the economic crisis caused by the COVID-19. Raising the minimum wage will circulate $2.6 billion in Maryland's economy through increased consumer spending. Many workers are still struggling to recover from debts they collected while unemployed due to the COVID-19. Half of the workers who will benefit from this raise are women and people of color, helping to narrow the gender and racial pay gap. 90% of the minimum wage workers are ages 20 plus. In 2020, 109,000 Marylanders have families' income less than the federal poverty line, 26,200 for a family of 4 at the time, even though they are employed. In 2020, 229,000 Maryland has family income between 100% and 200% of the poverty line, even though they are employed. Again, I am requesting you to be favorable on this bill, HB 698. It is important that we need to raise and get the money faster. People are just not making it today. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank
And
you,
I have a
Delegate.
panel. Yes, I have some people to come behind me that will
Okay.
speak on this bill. Thank you.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna call them right here in the order. Is there somebody
Okay.
specific you wanted me to call first?
No, just go
Okay.
right ahead. Yes.
All right, first we got Brig Dumais.
I'm Bridge Dumais, the political organizer with 1199 SEIU. We represent 10,000 members who work in hospitals and nursing homes across Maryland and DC. Our union urges a favorable report on HB 698 to speed up wage increases to $15 an hour and remove the off-ramp enabling BPW to halt wage increases. There is nowhere in Maryland where a worker can afford to live earning under $15. This was true when the fight for 15 passed and is more true now as the cost of living is higher than ever. Healthcare workers are in a dual crisis, battling both the health risks of COVID-19 and the consequences of short staffing. One 1199 member said, when we are short staffed, treating our patients becomes like working on an assembly line. We are not able to provide the care our patients deserve. Low wages are one of the most cited reasons as to why healthcare workers are quitting in droves. Another 1199 member was showing a new hire around a facility. When the 1199 member showed the new hire her pay rate, the new hire immediately said, "I'm going to the restroom." Shortly after that, the 1199 member looked out the window at the parking lot and saw the new hire get in her car, drive away, never to return. If we want to fix short staffing in healthcare, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is crucial. Not only healthcare workers, but all essential workers showed up on the front lines of COVID-19, putting themselves at risk while earning poverty wages. Low-wage essential workers were most adversely impacted by the economic consequences of COVID. So any plans for economic recovery must uplift Maryland's lowest paid workers. Throughout the pandemic, we have heard over and over again that essential workers are heroes, and that is true, but they are still being paid like zeros. I urge the committee to vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Alyssa Barron-Menza.
Hi, yes, my name is Alyssa Barron-Menza. I'm Vice President of Business for a Fair Minimum Wage and an 18-year resident of District 20. We support HB 698, which is timely given the pandemic and rising cost of living. MIT's living wage calculator indicates that the basic needs wage for a single adult without children working full-time in Maryland is already $17.25. Raising the minimum wage puts money in the pockets of people who most need to spend it. It boosts consumer buying power. Low pay typically means high employee turnover. Raising the minimum wage saves businesses money in lower turnover, reduced hiring and training costs, and lower error and accident rates. Businesses further benefit from better productivity, product quality, and customer service. The pandemic has made it clearer than ever that low-wage businesses have more trouble hiring and retaining workers. Raising the minimum wage faster to reflect current realities won't hurt small businesses. It raises the wage floor under all businesses and encourages the better business practices that help them survive and compete. Many businesses are already paying a $15 minimum wage or higher. Costco pays starting wages of $17. Target, Amazon, and Best Buy, for example, already pay at least $15. Many small businesses are paying $15 or higher now because they know it makes them more competitive with big businesses. They know employees often make the difference between repeat customers or lost customers. What do you want to do? Many of our members supporting this bill are small businesses like Vigilante Coffee in Hyattsville and College Park, BA Auto Care in Columbia, Community Forklift in Edmonston, and Waverly Ace Hardware, and 4 other hardware stores in Baltimore City and Montgomery County, as well as bigger businesses like And Pizza. We respectfully urge a favorable report to help workers, businesses, and communities recover from the pandemic and build a stronger economy. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Tyra Robinson. Okay, I do not see Ms. Robinson in the wait room. We'll go to Chris Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Christopher Meyer. I'm a research analyst at the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that seeks to foster broadly and equitably shared prosperity in Maryland through research-backed policy. I'm asking for a favorable report on HB 698. House Bill 698 would raise wages for Maryland workers who need help now. Even as of 2018, there was nowhere in Maryland where even a single adult working full-time and not caring for children could afford a basic living standard on less than $15 an hour. And that's even less true now, affordable now. As we've seen the cost of living rise at historic rates over the past year or so, the phase-in schedule for the state's current $15 minimum wage law, which was already inadequate, is much more so now. Strengthening wage standards would benefit workers of all backgrounds, with particularly meaningful benefits for working women and workers of color. As of 2021, the 10th percentile for wages in Maryland was $12.50. And yet men in Maryland had a 10th percentile wage of $13.46 compared to $12.02 for women. While wages by race and ethnicity at the 10th percentile are not available, we know at higher percentiles that Black and Latinx workers typically take home lower wages than their white counterparts. Improving minimum wage would also strengthen our economy. Family supporting wages are a crucial tool to make Maryland an attractive place to live and work, to draw people into the labor market, which makes a deeper talent pool for employers. Finally, there's a great deal of strong, high quality research on impacts of the minimum wage that's been accumulated over the past 20 years since the turn of the century. And the highest quality evidence shows essentially conclusively that there's no impact on the number of jobs available. Thank you, and I ask for a favorable report.
Thank you, sir. Christopher Apple.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And I should say I'm not a member of the sponsors panel. Would you like me to testify anyway?
Yes, sir. You're signed up.
Thank you so much. My name is Chris Apple. I'm a resident of Columbia, Maryland. I'm here today to ask you to support this bill. Income inequality has become a painful problem in this country over the last several decades. And the classic American dream of being able to work hard and provide for your family is getting farther and farther out of reach for many Marylanders. Many witnesses have mentioned the historic inflation rate, and it's more important than ever to ensure all people's wages can keep up with the cost of living. Maryland has already implemented an admirable policy of stepped increases to minimum wage, but I believe increasing the pace now is the right thing to do. Minimum wage jobs are not low skill, nor can we honestly say they exist for high school students to earn a little spending money. The reality is that many adults work these jobs, and these jobs are challenging, require real skills, and have real value. Nor can we say that national economic problems are an excuse to ask the worker to make do with less and sacrifice more. That practice goes back at least as far as the Great Depression, when companies began to prosper under the New Deal, but their workers were being asked to work longer and longer, and their pay wasn't rising with their company's fortunes. Congress intervened then to establish a minimum wage for almost all professions, in spite of how precarious the economic situation was, because those workers desperately needed help. Unfortunately, we are again in desperate times. Nationally, the lowest 20% of incomes has scarcely grown over the last 50 years. The rising costs of healthcare, rent, and other basic expenses have far outpaced any gains that the lowest 20% has seen. I think this bill helps to close that gap. I think it brings relief to some people who really need it, and I respectfully urge a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Terry Cavanaugh.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby and members of the Economic Matters Committee for the opportunity to testify in favor of House Bill 698. Terry Cavanaugh, Executive Director of the SEIU, Maryland and DC State Council. I won't repeat what others have already said, but I did look at my testimony from 3 years ago when the Economic Matters passed the bill. And I won't repeat my testimony from 3 years ago, but I was reminded that we asked to pass a clean bill And the clean bill, we had the increases were stretched out over a number of years. The General Assembly passed a bill, which is now the law, that further stretched it out. We think both of those things were a mistake because we didn't see a couple of things. We didn't see inflation at a 40-year high. We didn't see a pandemic coming. Both of those things have had tremendous impact on workers and on employers. So we think this is a time to make that adjustment at appropriate time. And it gives a time until this July for employers with 15 or more, and until next July for smaller employers. Because right now, if somebody was working full time, that's only $25,000 a year. And that is incredibly difficult to try to live on in the state of Maryland. The other factor that could happen, if these factors change, because many employers, as it's been stated, have increased wages, some substantially to attract workers. But what if the market changes? Would those same employers reduce wages to below $15 an hour and back to $12.50? So we ask you to correct this, and we ask for a favorable report on House Bill 698. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna Edwards. You're on mute, Ms. Edwards.
I had it unmuted. Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm Donna Edwards. I'm president of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO, representing over 300,000 working people in Maryland, union members. And I echo everything that has been said and want to emphasize it strongly. I only want to add, you have my written testimony. We support this. The time is now. Maryland is a rich state. It's a progressive state, and it does not belong in the behind of paying wages to workers. If Congress would have continued to increase the minimum wage along with the productivity growth since 1968, we would be looking at a $24 an hour minimum wage. That's what it takes. But we are looking at 15. It's time to pass this bill. And there's a lot of misinformation. People want to say teenagers are taking these jobs. This bill will benefit mostly. The typical worker is a female, 35 years old, with some college level degree or coursework, mostly a caretaker and working full time. Maintaining less than $15 an hour any longer just adds to the inequity and inequality that is growing daily in Maryland. So this is the right thing to do. Its time is now, and I ask for a favorable report on HB 698. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. We'll go to favorable with amendments. Lauren Callens.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby and members of the committee. I'm Lauren Callens with the Maryland Association of Community Services, and we represent providers of community services to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities across the state. We are here today as support with amendment, much the same position as we were in 2014 and again in 2019, when this committee carefully considered those minimum wage bills, HB 295 and HB 166 respectively. The amendment, then and now, requests the inclusion of a provider rate increase to help Maryland's developmental disability providers try to keep pace with the minimum wage. You all approved, and then the full General Assembly passed that amendment in both 2014 and 2019, yet HB 698 before you today does not include those rate increases. As you all may recall from your prior work on minimum wage and other issues that impact IDD providers, our members are primarily nonprofit organizations who rely on funding from the state and federal government. They do not charge for their services, and unlike other businesses, DDA licensed Medicaid providers are federally prohibited from passing on cost increases to the people they support. Almost everything Delegate Turner mentioned in her intro applies to our workforce. Many DD providers are already operating on thin margins due to a state reimbursement rate that only allows for a starting wage that hovers near the minimum wage for direct support workers. That fact, combined with a workforce decimated by the pandemic, means many DD providers will simply not be able to absorb the costs of increased wages without funding from the state to do so. We urge you to amend this bill to include the provider rate increases that you so carefully constructed 3 years ago. Without this amendment, the community supports that over 18,000 Marylanders with IDD rely on will be jeopardized. Additional details are included in the written testimony of the Developmental Disabilities Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to unfavorables. First up, Mike O'Halloran.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the House Economic Matters Committee. For the record, my name is Mike O'Halloran, representing NFIB Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic Petroleum Distributors Association. Let me start off by saying, you heard a lot from proponents about how the COVID-19 economic crisis negatively affected them, their stories of trying to make ends meet. And I guarantee you the small business community shares in those concerns and those pains and those stories. You've heard from me, you've heard from small businesses in your own district about the sacrifices that our small business owners have made throughout this pandemic. So I want to keep that in the forefront of committee members. And let's talk about inflation as well. Inflation is not only hitting workers, it's hitting small business owners, trying to get their supplies, their materials, so that they can go to their clients and customers and still be able to give them the service and the work ethic that they've come to know. All of these things are impacting small business owners. In fact, inflation, according to a recent survey by NFIB, is the #1 concern. That's the first time since 1981 that inflation is even ranked for our members. And I'll leave you with this. A small business owner, I know we talked about how 15 or more employees is not a small business owner. It is. So a small business owner with 15 employees on June 30th will see their labor costs jump $300 overnight. Now, that may not seem like a lot to some folks, but if you extrapolate that for the rest of the year, we're talking about nearly $55,000 in unanticipated labor costs if this bill were to pass. That no small business owner can overcome. So we do respectfully request an unfavorable report for House Bill 698. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the House Economic Matters Committee. For the record, my name is Dana Kaufman. You have my written testimony. I'm here today on behalf of several senior care provider associations that participate in the Medicaid program. And my testimony is very similar to what you've heard from Ms. Callens. And I absolutely want to agree with the prior statements that our healthcare workers are our heroes. And really, the state should be treating them as such and funding the Medicaid program in a manner that actually covers the cost to provide care, including the payment of appropriate wages. As you did hear, similar to the developmentally disabled providers, the original bill passed in 2019 included a 4% increase for the Medicaid budget for those providers to offset the increased cost of minimum wage. We would ask that if any bill is to be passed, then that 4% is accounted for, but also for each of the increases, which if we had gone on the original cycle would have been 3 increases into the Medicaid budget. But I also want to point out that for our membership that do care for the elderly and other disabled populations who do not accept Medicaid, the ability to pivot with such a stark increase right now would be extremely difficult. Those individuals do care for individuals on limited budgets, even if it's not part of the Medicaid program. And what ends up happening is that cost will get put back on those residents and clients, which will make it even more difficult for them to afford those services. So we ask ultimately that if this bill passes, that the increases in the Medicaid budget that was originally done in 2019 remain as increases. Thank you very much.
Just to confirm, more of a technical question, Ms. Kaufman, you are or should be signed up favorable with amendments, because I have you unfavorable, but I have Ms. Towns as favorable with amendments.
Yes, I didn't oppose, basically because we need to have those rate increases if this bill were to move.
Okay, thank you. Kaylee Locklear.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman and honorable members of the committee. For the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in respectful opposition to this bill. We worked with the committee in good faith to ensure a phase-in would occur to help businesses adjust to the state's new wage over time. And as COVID's impacts rage on for all of us, this is not the time to be accelerating this on fragile businesses. Many employers, because of workforce shortage issues, have been able to offer higher wages, but many have still never returned to previous revenue levels. And as many proponents pointed to, Mike mentioned it as well, inflation is a serious concern, but businesses too are experiencing massive cost increases as well. And I've said this in other hearings this year, but employees truly have more bargaining power than ever, and the free market has been responding accordingly. This is just not needed. Many employers are paying more than ever than they've ever paid before for labor, as there are more job openings in Maryland than Marylanders to actually work in them. And finally, the bill would repeal the Board of Public Works authority to temporarily suspend a scheduled increase in the state minimum wage. If there is one thing that we have all learned in the past 2 years, it is that unexpected crises can and do occur, and we believe the authority should remain. So for these reasons and more, we urge an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Griffin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Andrew Griffin here on behalf of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce in opposition to House Bill 698. You have my written comments, so we'll be brief. However, we'll refer you to those to address a lot of the discussion around the relationship between inflation and the wages being offered now. I think U.S. Department of Labor and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the report that they recently came out with addresses that quite well. House Bill 698 upends the hard-fought negotiations leading to the phase-in, which you've heard about already. I will just touch on raising the minimum wage to $15 by July of this year would represent roughly a 20% increase in labor costs in a 6-month time frame alone. That simply just adds more uncertainty to small business owners when what they need most is certainty right now. So I will just mention that. And also to my previous colleague's point about repealing authority of the Board of Public Works for a one-time stop gap hardly seems necessary. If there was ever a time that authority was going to be used, it certainly would have been over the last 2 years. It was not. So clearly it would never be politically prudent to do that. So I don't think it doesn't seem necessary. With that, I will just conclude, urge an unfavorable report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Melvin Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Melvin Thompson, representing the Restaurant Association of Maryland, and we also strongly oppose this legislation. Accelerating the phase-in of Maryland's $15 minimum wage will place additional burdens on our businesses and make it harder to fully recover from the pandemic amid soaring food and product price increases due to inflation and the ongoing supply chain issues. The longer phase-in schedule was adopted in 2019 to help mitigate the impact on employers. And our businesses are planning for the phase-in schedule under current law and not the earlier effective dates proposed by this legislation. Passage of this bill would also force employers to increase wages for their current experienced staff sooner than planned, as the starting wages would quickly approach the levels of more experienced employees. And this would exacerbate the higher labor costs associated with this legislation and would do so much faster than our businesses can handle. And for these reasons, we oppose the legislation and request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Final witness, Kirk McCauley.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the Economic Matters Committee. My name is Kirk McCauley. I represent WMDA, service stations, convenience stores, and repair facilities in Maryland. Now, business is trying to get back to normal in small steps, keeps its fingers crossed concerning COVID. Increased costs, loss of business during COVID has small business struggling to recover. That continues to this day. All you have to do is look around your surroundings today. Parking garages half full, and we're having this hearing online. The businesses I represent depend on vehicle traffic, which is not there. This bill would cost a small employer with 14 employees full-time, $56 a week as of July 2022, if it were to go into effect. That's $784 a week plus $156 in taxes, $940 increase in a week for your employees. $48,000 a year, $48,880 actually, in a year's time. Where's that money going to come from? We're struggling right now to get back to normal. A business with 15 or more employees, with 15 employees, if this bill were to take effect in July 1st, 2022, would cost them $1,500 a week, plus $300 in taxes, $93,000 a year. That's just unsurmountable. It won't work. Both are examples years ahead of what the rate would be under current minimum wage table. We need those years to recover. Please give HB 698 an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And this concludes the hearing for House Bill 698. We'll now go on to House Bill 431, which is Delegate Foley. And I see that you are in here and ready to go.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, members of the Economic Matters Committee. I'm Delegate Linda Foley, and I'm presenting HB 431, the Maryland Fair Scheduling Act. This bill would apply to franchise food and retail establishments that are part of a chain of at least 10 establishments nationwide. It does not apply to small businesses. Let me be clear about something else. HB 431 is not an advanced scheduling proposal. It does not mandate that an employer guarantee any schedule, nor does it provide terms for posting a schedule in advance. Rather, this bill aims to protect an employee from unexpected last-minute changes being implemented by management or from the employee being overscheduled. It requires employers to give adequate notice of changes to the work schedule after the work schedule has been posted and the employee has been notified. It establishes that a worker be provided adequate time in between shifts by giving the employee the right to decline work hours that occur the 11 hours following the end of a shift. So when a shift ends, you have 11 hours off before the next shift begins. It protects workers from retaliation from employers for declining to work hours not included in their original schedule. And finally, it requires the appropriate maintenance of scheduling and pay records. Workers and employers are free to mutually agree to change scheduled hours at any time. In short, the primary purpose of this bill is to deter erratic scheduling and provide hourly employees the work hours that they have already been scheduled for and let them avoid last-minute changes, either additional hours or fewer hours. Let me explain more. Employees often are placed on a standby mode or on call in case they are needed to cover shifts not worked by other scheduled employees. Workers who are placed on standby and called in to unscheduled shifts must arrange for additional childcare, additional transportation. Sometimes it affects second jobs. It can also affect class schedules if the employee is going to school, and household budgets can be impacted. HB 431 ensures that employees be guaranteed a minimum of 4 hours work for such on-call shifts outside of their normal schedules. It also requires a minimum of 2 hours pay when a worker who has committed to an on-call shift is released from working. Just as important, this bill protects an employee from being scheduled to work shifts too closely together without adequate rest in between. Providing employees with a sensible break between shifts allows time for sleeping, commuting, and time to care for oneself and one's family. Employees would have the right to decline work hours that occur less than 11 hours after the end of a worked shift. Employers would have to compensate employees who agree to work in the 11-hour break at 1.5 times their regular rate of pay for any hours worked by the employee within the 11-hour break time frame. This type of fair scheduling law is essential to provide structure to workers' own lives and the lives of those who depend upon them, such as their children and elderly parents and others who require caregiving. Erratic schedules are particularly difficult for women workers who constitute a large majority of the hourly workforce. They need to often need to juggle their jobs and caregiving responsibilities. On-call shifts, fluctuating work schedules, and too many hours scheduled in sequence without rest can turn an employee's life into a chronic crisis over the clock. This bill does not make unreasonable demands on these large retailers. Far more stringent fair work week laws and scheduling ordinances than what are included in this bill exist in 9 other states already. In conclusion, this bill reasonably holds employers accountable to the employees when last-minute shift cancellations occur or when on-call shift hours are reduced after an employee reports to work. The benefits of adopting fair and reasonable scheduling practices can reduce absenteeism, lower turnover, improve the health of workers, and increase productivity. I urge a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. First, we'll go to Lindsay Muniak. Hopefully I said that correct. Muniak. I do not see her. Okay, Don Edwards. Mr. Edwards, yep.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Again, thank you, Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm Donna Edwards. I'm president of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO. And you have our written testimony. Let me just add, I echo everything from the sponsor and appreciate this bill. Jobs offering unpredictable and unstable work schedules are more likely to be filled by women, and particularly women of color. She is more likely to face wage gaps and chronic economic loss from being in low-paid jobs, and she's most likely also a single mom. The volatile scheduling complicates her life. To plan for the children in safe care, to attend training or classes to improve her skills, but most importantly, it also hampers her economic stability, because without knowing the schedule, it's very difficult for her to pick up a second job that also may have volatile scheduling. So a new study that was done in the University of California and was cited, you can look it up from our testimony, demonstrates that workers who have schedules 14 days in advance report more financial security and overall health and well-being. This is so important, just like the last bill, in addressing Maryland's just extreme inequality and equity that we keep seeing growing and growing in Maryland. A recent article in the Restaurant Dive also shows that an inconstant schedule is the second highest reason for why restaurant workers leave their business. So studies and the industry's own data demonstrate that fair scheduling promotes retention, better economic and well-being for the workers. It improves the industry staffing shortages. And for these reasons, we ask for a favorable report for House Bill 431. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea Finuccio.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Crosby and members of the Economic Committee. I'm Andrea Finuccio, an employment attorney with CASA, the largest membership-based immigrant rights organization in the Mid-Atlantic with more than 90,000 members in Maryland alone. On behalf of our members, CASA urges a favorable report for House Bill 431. I've gone into more detail about these impacts in my written testimony, but overall, this bill would provide predictability and stability within the service industry. When providing pro bono legal services to the low-income community members, I routinely hear these issues that would be addressed by this bill. Service workers consistently inquire about the legality of workplace practices, such as last-minute schedule changes, hour reductions, and getting sent home from a shift when there just simply isn't enough work to be done. This bill would mandate employers' compensation in many of these circumstances and help to mitigate the harm caused by these disruptive practices. They also ask me about the backlash they face when they push back against actions. I've heard from young adults in college who were told by their managers that they had to come in for an on-call shift or be fired, despite the fact that they're literally sitting in the middle of class. A bill like this would prevent this sort of retaliation, giving employees the right to decline work hours not included in an initial work schedule without facing retaliations or being fired, and then providing recourse if these actions do happen. I've had to tell working mothers that there's no recourse for them when their schedule changes, even when it interferes with things like doctor's appointments for their children or long-standing childcare. This bill would cover the gaps faced by part-time workers and workers within their first year who are not covered under the Family Medical Leave Act, allowing them to care for themselves and their family. Most people entering the job force expect predictability, a set work schedule, respect for hours available that you submitted, and the expectation that your schedule will, for the most part, look the same month to month. But for 350,000 Marylanders working in retail, fast food, and restaurant jobs, that is often not the case. Thank you, Delegate Foley, for sponsoring this bill, and CASA urges a favorable report for HB 431.
Thank you, Kayla Mock.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Crosby and members of the House Economic Matters Committee. My name is Kayla Mock, and I'm with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 400. I appreciate the opportunity to share my testimony on behalf of over 10,000 members here in Maryland, working on the front lines in grocery, retail, food processing, and distribution, law enforcement, and healthcare. I'd also like to thank the patron, Delegate Foley, for bringing this bill forward on behalf of working people in Maryland. I'd like to share my personal story here today. Before I had the pleasure of representing our members here in this space, I worked for Giant Food for 12 years. I worked under similar, although probably stricter, fair scheduling guidelines under my union contract. And most of our members at 400 work under some version of fair scheduling guidelines. These companies are still profitable. They still have access to flexible workforce. I was called in when the dreaded snowstorms, drove up business. I was sent home when trucks were delayed or things were slow. And so often workers in these situations are treated as on-call workers when the nature of their work should not be on call. We used to have a joke at Giant that we were stocking, shelves and groceries. We weren't doing brain surgery. And fair scheduling, while I was there, it helped me earn a degree while maintaining my job and benefits without the fear of missing work for an on-call shift. There's a lot of also financial implications to this bill. I've heard from workers who have had to leave their jobs because they could not schedule chemo treatments because of on-call work, single moms who were let go in retaliation for missing on-call work. And so, yes, there will be financial implications, but the lack of these bills are causing worker shortages and financial impacts now as well. And so for all those reasons, and all of Maryland workers, we urge a favorable report on HB 431.
Thank you. We'll go to the unfavorables. Mike O'Halloran.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the House Economic Matters Committee. Once again, Mike O'Halloran, representing NFIB in Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic Petroleum Distributors Association. Look, I will simply point you as part of my testimony to the fiscal note. And while certainly talking about small business in particular, you may look at the bill itself and say, well, why would a small business owner be concerned about this bill? Well, I'll tell you why. Because not only are there plenty of retails and restaurants that would be impacted by this bill, but we're particularly speaking about franchisees and franchisors. The folks that they are entrepreneurs in every sense of the word. They will be negatively impacted by this bill. You heard a lot about flexibility and allowing a worker to trade shifts when they can. Look, there's nothing prohibiting them from doing that right now. And I will say that by and large, these on-call positions, the folks that work these positions, they enjoy that flexibility. They know very well when they sign up for the job that it's an on-call position. And if they're not satisfied with that, the good news is, as you heard in the last bill hearing, small businesses are hiring. So with that, we do request an unfavorable committee report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kaylee Locklear.
Good afternoon again, honorable members of the Economic Matters Committee. Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in respectful opposition to this bill. The ability to schedule in response to sales, peak seasons, economic conditions, employee issues or sickness, weather, or public events is essential when running a retail business. Many times, schedule changes are necessary, and by mandating that retailers cannot make needed changes or incur a pay penalty will severely impact scheduling and operations. For many industries, a schedule that is posted too far in advance does not take into account all of the factors necessary to create an accurate schedule, and companies may be forced to release a baseline schedule with limited hours, i.e., the lowest number of hours possible to keep the business open. From there, as business inputs are known, such as truck arrivals, special promotional events, community events, employee staffing issues, hours will be added and employees will need to pick up those hours on an ad hoc basis. This rigid scheduling ignores the employees who choose jobs because of flexible scheduling. It also ignores the differences in how businesses operate. I'd also add that many employees value the workplace flexibility afforded by the retail industry and are satisfied with the balance their employer strikes between accommodating their needs and addressing key business needs. The unique scheduling flexibility in retail jobs our industry offers helps individuals balance important priorities in their lives, such as going to school, working another job, or raising a family. And finally, contrary to a statement I believe I heard earlier, there is only one state in the entire United States that's passed a restrictive scheduling bill, and it looks nothing like this. So for all those reasons and more, we urge an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Melvin Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Melvin Thompson, representing the Restaurant Association of Maryland, and we also strongly oppose this legislation. Many employees choose to work in the food service industry because of our flexible scheduling policies. And the restrictions proposed by this bill would be unworkable for the restaurant industry because we schedule employees according to customer volume. When business is good, we need all hands on deck. When customer traffic slows, which can happen for various reasons and at any time, our industry simply cannot afford to pay employees for shifts during times when there's not enough customer revenue to cover the labor costs. The nature of the food service business requires our employers to schedule accordingly and to adjust as needed. And this legislation also includes some additional burdensome record keeping and documentation requirements, which even the fiscal notes mentions could cause confusion and misunderstandings. And for these and other reasons, we strongly oppose this legislation and request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk McCauley.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby. Members of the Economic Matters Committee, my name is Kirk McCauley. I represent service stations, convenience stores, and repair facilities in Maryland. HB 431 is confusing as to who it applies to. When I sent this out to my members to look at and see what they thought of it, they said, does this apply to me? After reading it, they didn't know. Mainly the confusion is in this franchise. I have some members with a franchise as part of their business. They do not personally have 10 franchises, but there are thousands of that type of franchises nationwide, where they might only have one franchise. Example would be a Subway franchise inside one of the convenience stores. These are truly small business. The franchisor has nothing to do with hiring, firing, hourly wage, or work schedule. HB 431 redefines what you must pay, when you must pay time and a half. Please take a look at the physical notes and the policy note. On page 4 under small business, legislative services says likely because they're not sure who it affects. It likely doesn't affect small business, but they're not sure. HB 431 generates additional costs that are significant in backroom systems and bookkeeping. Will generate misunderstanding between employees and employer. Heavy fines and all the right of private action. All this makes for a bad bill for small business. Please give HB 431 an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. And this concludes the hearing for House Bill 698.
Excuse, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but they've mistakenly put Lindsay Marcus. She's the one that signed me up, Marcia Debut.
Okay, ma'am, you have to properly sign up for me to call you. So I apologize. So just next time, make sure that they sign up the proper name, okay?
Okay, thank
But I
you.
can't, yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry for the confusion. All right, this concludes the hearing for House Bill 698 and for all the bills today. Members, please check your email and we'll see you tomorrow.